We want to welcome up our next fantastic panel. And it is still focused very much first and foremost on what Amazon has been doing in terms of selecting businesses to be receiving its first set of cash from the Climate Pledge Fund. Of course, billions and billions being focused on by Amazon in this particular regard. We want to congratulate, therefore, the people who've been accepting this money, from Matt Peterson, of course, is Director of Corporate Development at Amazon, who's had the tough task of selecting the first allotment of winners, and therefore Rob Nivens with us, of course, founder and CEO of Carbon Cure Technologies, Diego Saez-Gil, founder and CEO of Pachama, and also Ryan Morris, Executive Chairman of Turntide Technologies. Gentlemen, great to have you here. And Matt, I'm going to ask you first and foremost to set the scene for us. Just how hard was this to whittle it down to these small amount of winners, and what excited you the most when you were looking through all the decks?
No, thanks, Carolyn. It's great to be here. And just to clarify, this was not I wouldn't characterize it as winners. I would say that they're the first cohort of what will be many investments that Amazon will make as part of the Climate Pledge Fund. And looking at the group today and the previous panel you have, I think the common theme is that each of these companies, from Amazon's perspective, is a key piece of the puzzle that will help us decarbonize by the year 2040, which is what we committed to as part of the Climate Pledge. And we're looking to employ what these companies' technologies are doing in our own operations, and hopefully in the operations of other companies as well. I mean, it's going to be really difficult to get to total decarbonization, and 20 years to do it is a big challenge. But by funding these companies and many more to come, we're hoping to establish a program that can help develop these products, services, and technologies that will get us there.
Well, Rob, to be among the first cohort, I'm sure, feels like an accolade in and of itself. Talk to us about Carbon Cure and the way in which you're really fixated upon the cement industry, first and foremost.
Sure, I'd be happy to do that. It's a pleasure to be back here at Bloomberg as well. I think last time we were at Bloomberg was for the Bloomberg New Energy Pioneers Award, so always exciting times. You're right, we work in the cement and concrete industry. What we do is use carbon dioxide as a value-added feedstock. So instead of looking at it like a harmful greenhouse gas, is we repurpose that waste CO2 so that it can provide higher value concrete. And we have the right business model that makes it so that it maintains the same price of concrete in the marketplace, and has already been supplied to millions and millions of yards of concrete for various projects, including many with Amazon. So it's our way of rapidly decarbonizing the cement and concrete industry while providing additional value and without having to disrupt this industry, which we just simply don't have time to do.
But Rob, how did you look at the cement and concrete industry and think this has got to change? What sparked that initial focus there?
Well, this technology was actually based out of my thesis at McGill University. So this is something that, of course, is extremely personal, and have fostered its growth right from the idea stage. So this didn't necessarily start off with that big revelation, but like I'm sure the other panelists as well, as this starts to emerge over time. And it started off as an academic challenge, and then now it's become an opportunity to be able to really have an impact on the global climate race. So it's an extremely rewarding opportunity, and I'm so happy to be part of great partnerships like this one with Amazon, and also co-led by Breakthrough Energy Ventures.
Diego, it must feel all the more pertinent what you're doing now when we see basically so many states in the west of the US burning around you. And I know this speaks very much emotionally to what you've just been through. How you yourself have been affected by the fires. This must make your focus on forestry and in particular carbon capture even more pertinent.
Yeah, that's right. Unfortunately, my home burned down to the fires a couple of weeks ago. It couldn't make our mission more personal. Thank you. Fortunately, I'm fine and coming back strongly. But yes, our work at Pachama is precisely on conserving and restoring forest as a solution to climate change. And unfortunately, climate change will make forest fires more frequent, and that makes it even more important to be proactive at managing forest, at restoring forest, and forest can be an enormous part of the solution. We have about 1 billion hectares in the planet that can be restored as forest, which has the potential of take down hundreds of gigatons of CO2 from the atmosphere. So yes, very personal and very excited to be working with Amazon on this important mission.
And what does Pachama do exactly when it comes to the forest? You're analyzing data, you're looking at ways in which to offset certain companies' carbon footprint, right?
Correct. So there is this framework by which reforestation and forest conservation projects can receive carbon credits for the carbon that they're removing from the atmosphere. What we do is we help make this market more efficient by using satellite images and artificial intelligence to predict exactly how much carbon is being sequestered by those forests, to look at the historical data of what happened in the region, and then to monitor that over time, keeping the projects accountable, making the market more transparent. And then, yes, we connect those projects with companies that are looking to achieve net zero or carbon neutrality, and assuring these companies that their investments are working.
And Ryan, you are a serial entrepreneur, someone who's steered many a business, and you're now really focusing at Turntide on making electrical motors ever more efficient, trying to be of optimal efficiency. Why there? Why focus there?
So electric motors are kind of the hidden champions of civilization. Most people, when you think of electricity, you think of lighting or electric vehicles maybe, but literally everything that moves has an electric motor behind it. So whether that's, you know, the water coming out of your tap from pumps or fans circulating the air in building or compressors and refrigeration, literally half of all the electricity in the entire world, over $1 trillion a year, is consumed by electric motors. And the incredible thing about it is that 98% of the installed base of motors today is what's called an AC induction motor that Nikola Tesla invented in 1888. So it's one of the largest, least changed things, markets that I'm aware of in the world. And there's no path to 100% carbon-free civilization unless we solve both the supply generation side with, you know, solar, wind, this sort of thing, as well as addressing the demand side. And so motors are kind of the single biggest component of demand. And so that was really, it's actually a bit of a lifelong mission for me. So I learned about nuclear fusion when I was 11. That sort of inspired me to, you know, dedicate my life to solving hard problems like this. But motors are critical to the solution here.
Wow, from 11, that's focus for you. I'm so
you're kid.
Sort of awe-inspired. Well, it is inspiring when you look at the extent of areas that you're looking to disrupt at the moment, with Rob, Diego, Ryan, looking at different industries, looking at different ways of helping certain businesses, looking at AI, looking at the developments. How, Matt, do you look at looking at expending your money, assigning the pledge and indeed money within it, looking to invest? How do you ensure that certain businesses rise up above each other? How do you select them? What are the sort of criteria you look for? Because this seems to be so wide in breadth.
Yeah, no, I agree. This is a big space, and it's only going to get bigger because climate change is not going away. And in fact, it's getting worse. And from the perspective of new technologies and inventions that are going to be coming out to address it and helping companies like Amazon address it, I just see that as just not slowing down anytime soon, and in fact, expanding quite a bit. In terms of the question of how we look at it, we basically divide our investments into 6 categories. We have transportation, energy, buildings, manufacturing, circular economy, and food and agriculture. And these are general areas that Amazon wants to improve its own carbon footprint in as well. So by looking at companies in each of these sectors and then asking ourselves, well, how can their products help Amazon decarbonize? We really answer the question of, you know, how do we get to net zero? But it also informs us which companies are ones we're interested in. And then once we identify the products of the companies, we ask ourselves, are they good companies to invest in? And that's where we apply the skills that any investor would use to evaluate a company. Does it have good management? Does it have a broad addressable market? Does it have employees and technology that can help it scale? does it have the ability to expand and grow its technology? And then once you go through that process of due diligence, it becomes relatively easy because the product itself is helping us address what we need to do and achieve our goals strategically. And then the companies are well run, they're well managed, and we can invest, I guess, with confidence that it will be a good from a returns perspective and the success of the company's perspective.
Is there a way, Matt, you can encapsulate what helped these businesses, these 5 businesses, of course, because we're also thinking of Rivian and Redwood previously, that allowed them to float to the top, that really meant that they were the must-haves for the first lump sum that you were looking to give out?
Yeah, well, I mean, the first thing that we look at, and any investor would look at, is just the management. You look for missionaries and not mercenaries. And just listening to this panel describe their business and listening to the previous panel describing their companies and their life mission. I mean, how can you have someone on this panel who studied in college and has a degree in what he's doing today with respect to Rob and CarbonCure. You have Ryan, who was from an early age was interested in motors and nuclear fusion and inventing devices that will be efficient and address a broad need. You have Diego, who is probably more than anybody on this panel personally affected by climate change. I mean, I can't think of anything more than making a life's mission out of a personal experience. It's what he's describing. And so you ask yourself, are these people who are dedicated to the mission? And everything else is second to that. And once you find a team and people who you feel are going to take what investment we give them and convert it into long-term results and value, then that's what we're looking for, and I think what we found with our first group here.
So Rob, talk to us about, from studying from your life's work when it came to academia, putting it into practice, you now get the funding that is going to so help grow the business continuing. What do you put the money to work in first?
Yeah, well, I just want to touch on Matt's point there about mission. Is like that is the most critical piece, I think, in all of these companies and our growth. And for our company, our mission is to reduce 500 million tons by 2030. That's an audacious number, but we just released our roadmap this week about how we're going to achieve that. And we, as a team and through our broader partners, firmly believe that path is possible. This round of investors was much more than just the money. Each one of the investors that were included in this round had a very important role in helping us achieve that mission. So I think it starts with having a very clear mission, setting out the right goals and along our pathway to achieve that goal, putting the right team and technology. So for us, the next steps are twofold. One is global expansion. So there's a lot of concrete plants, over 100,000 globally. It's the most abundant man-made material on Earth. So that therein is a large market. We have the right business model and partners to be able to access that. The other thing that we'll be doing with this investment is bringing new technologies that are complementary to what we're doing today so that we're not just relying upon one approach, but a whole portfolio.
Interesting. So new technologies, the new forefront. If you can, Diego, spell out for us where next you look to. You've spelt out the problem. You've spelt out the way in which you're using technology to help solve that. Is it about now scaling up? Is it going more outside of the US, going global? Where do you put the money to work in the immediate future for you?
Yes, we will continue investing in our technologies, which means hiring great engineers. And it's great to see a lot of talent in Silicon Valley that wants to transition to work on climate. So we're going to be hiring brilliant engineers. We're going to be investing in data. We purchase satellite data to make our analysis. And then, yes, we're going to make investments on helping originate new projects. If we are going to solve climate change, we need thousands of reforestation projects around the world. So we hope to help ignite a new generation of reforestation projects around the world that can be easily verified and monitored with our technologies and then supported by companies seeking to achieve their climate goals.
Diego, it's interesting that you mentioned there's a lot of talent in Silicon Valley looking to work on climate-focused missions. What about talent outside of Silicon Valley, and how much has this COVID era in which we live in meant that you can look for talent outside of that remit, and what other countries are producing such talent, do you think?
Yes, absolutely. We became a remote company when COVID started, and that means that we can now tap into the talent of the world. And yes, we are seeing people from all over the world reaching out to us, very inspired by our mission and wanting to move their careers from finance and technology and traditional industries into climate change. So I think that is also something very exciting, not only for us, but for every startups and entrepreneur thinking on starting climate companies.
Ryan, to that point, I feel when I was lucky enough to be sat in Silicon Valley and that we're in San Francisco for a while, anchoring out there, it felt like the main issue for every single business was talent. That was sort of the area that kept them up at night. Is that what's your biggest obstacle right now? How are you going to be putting the money to work and expanding Turntide Technologies in its next step?
Yeah, so something I guess to understand, if you're going to go into these traditional industries, they have very high reliability requirements. So like there's a reason why people didn't reinvent the electric motor before. It's a very, very hard problem. So the benefit of that is that the best engineers really want to work on the hardest problems because frankly, it's the most impactful, it's the most interesting. But it did, between us and our predecessor company, that we were founded by acquiring 7 years ago, it actually took 10 years to solve the core technology in order to make the product. It's now worked for about 3.5 years. So in terms of where the money's going, it really took us about 3 years that sort of we graduated from over this last 6 months to really prove the reliability, prove kind of the validation of our initial go-to-market, which was commercial HVAC retrofit. And so now we're at the point sort of as a new phase of a company of really scaling and then broadening out into new applications. There's something like 20 million packaged rooftop units just in the US that we can retrofit, but there's millions and millions of motors in other applications. So, we're certainly hiring very aggressively. That's certainly, hopefully, great smart engineers who are watching this, go take a look at our company. We have a pretty unique culture that empowers the smartest and best people to get them to do their best work.
And great smart engineers and great smart people who are all viewing this at the moment. Please do start sending your questions for these incredible panelists. And I'm going to send my next question to you, Matt, because you were helping spell out really about the ways in which you try and focus in on areas that Amazon want to look at, the 5 areas, and whether it be sort of food and agriculture that you want to really try and solve and become carbon neutral in, whether it's delivery and point of service. Were there any trends you could see bubbling beneath the surface of where some of the most exciting opportunities were when you were confronted with all these businesses that you went out and looked at?
Well, there are a lot of really interesting areas. And as you mentioned, when we first gave out information for companies to contact us, we received literally thousands of inquiries. So I don't think that it's going to be an issue to find good companies and good technologies, but just various ideas that we've seen more than once and areas of interest are new forms of renewable energy, new types of battery storage, just electrified vehicles of all types. They could be planes, they could be ships, they could be cars, trucks. CO2 removal solutions. I think there's a lot of discussion around how that can be more either overtly through direct air or through other products that we're looking at least as part of this panel, for natural solutions or through what Rob is doing with Carbon Cure. Recycling is an area that Amazon is very focused on, and circular economy, and that's something we've looked at a lot of solutions, or at least looked at a lot of companies. And then low carbon fuels. That's a big one for us. A few months ago, Amazon announced that it had purchased 6 million gallons of sustainable aviation fuel for its fleet of jets. And that's something that I would love to really find a way to address, is that aviation is one of the hardest problems to solve from a climate perspective and from an emissions perspective, and that there don't exist electric planes today. And so, but aviation is such an important part of business as well as personal people's lives. So we're going to have to figure out quickly sort of what we can do in that space.
And it must, as you're saying, we were hearing from Diego that an awful lot of the talent out there now wants to focus in on mission-based purposes that is helping tackle this climate crisis that we find ourselves. Matt, how do you find the competition out there almost to give money at the moment? I'm sure there must be a lot of other funds wanting to get in on this space. What is it that you think Amazon offers at the moment that sets you apart? Is it about the direct way in which these businesses can serve a need in the right here, the right now. You sort of give them the outlet for demand.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And that we don't consider ourselves a venture capital firm. I mean, we don't look to compete. In fact, as Rob mentioned, we partner with many firms, including Breakthrough Energy Ventures and others that are doing this from more of a VC standpoint. Our value is very distinct in that what we're trying to do is not only give companies money and capital to grow their businesses, we're trying to give them demand for their products. And it goes beyond just what Amazon is doing, but it goes into the entire climate pledge. And that's that's our long-term strategy, is that if we build a coalition of companies that include Verizon and Mercedes and Reckitt Benckiser, Infosys, and many others to come, then you're creating a huge market signal that there is demand for products that will help companies get to net zero carbon quickly. And then when you have that demand, and then you pair that with the companies that we're investing in that are building those products that will help get those companies to that point, I think that's a really interesting ecosystem you're creating. And Amazon being part of that and promoting that environment is very different than what a VC would do. And I think it's very unique. So as we grow, my goal is to say we have 100 companies that we invest in as part of the Climate Pledge Fund. Say we have over 100 companies that are Climate Pledge signatories. And just imagine what that interconnection would look like when you have so many large companies with the same goal in mind, and you just have a large group of amazing entrepreneurs and mission-driven people trying to find solutions for them. I mean, that's the goal of what the Climate Pledge could become, Climate Pledge and Climate Pledge Fund.
Really inspiring to hear about. And Rob, inspire us a little bit more about the global nature of this, because the companies that Matt was just identifying are global in their nature, in large part. And certainly Amazon is in terms of its own footstep and footprint. You were talking to us about how cement in and of itself is like one of the most mass-produced materials out there in the world. Where are you seeing initial demand coming from firstly? And is it outside of the remits of US? Where have you been surprised by?
Yeah, well, great question. And just to clarify, it is the most abundantly used material only after drinking water. So it's really all around us, but we notice it. And it also has a very sizable CO2 footprint. Certainly, the industry is trying very hard right now to decarbonize. We had a panelist on earlier today that talked about that from the cement sector. But carbon capture and utilization, or carbon removal, is going to be a key component of the solution. That will be about 50% of their decarbonization pathway. So a lot needs to happen in this space. I think for ourselves, where I think it's been most interesting is to see how well this technology is fitting in Asia. And certainly wherever you see population growth is where you also see most concrete consumption, especially in developing countries where they haven't built the infrastructure already. So they need to be choosing the right low carbon pathways, which don't lock in the emissions. And that brings up the topic of embodied CO2 emissions, which are so critical for us to be able to have an impact within the shortest time frame. And that's where CarbonCure can really have a significant impact because of the high embodied carbon nature of concrete.
Amazing in terms of Asia being a real area of focus. Diego, sort of unsurprisingly, forests by their very nature are international, and a lot of them sadly aren't here in America, or if they are, they're seeing the devastation among them. We've got a question from the audience focused at you in particular, Diego, asking about how companies are looking to potentially monetize some of their forestry assets. Is that something you're seeing locally or internationally, and what's the timeline on that for monetization?
Yes, indeed, forests are global, and we have different things to do as a humanity in terms of forests around the world to tackle climate change. In the tropical forests, we need to conserve the Amazon rainforest. Congo, Indonesia has these old growth rainforests that need to be conserved. And in those cases, yes, we need to support projects that stop illegal deforestation and help landowners monetize these lands versus other alternative economic activities such as cattle ranching or agriculture. In the US and in other countries, there is the opportunity to do reforestation or what's called improved forest management, and allowing, yes, timber companies and family-owned forests to monetize their lands by farming carbon, as we like to say, by growing their trees and contributing to climate change and monetizing their lands through that. That's what we're going to be focusing on, accelerating, making those processes more efficient.
Interesting. And Matt, we've got a question for you coming from the audience about talking about the electrification of transportation. How do you see a viable technology for decarbonization at the moment in terms of hydrogen fuel or in terms of something? The question of the audience is blue hydrogen. I show my naivety here for not knowing the intricacies of blue hydrogen, but where do you see the opportunities there?
Yeah, hydrogen is really interesting. There's a lot of talk about electrification, and it's something Amazon's very invested in with Rivian, our 100,000 electric delivery vehicles for our last mile. But when you get into longer distances, electric vehicles are challenged until better batteries are developed and more infrastructure is established. So hydrogen is often thought of as a potential bridge to that. And hydrogen also potentially could be used for aviation. And that's something that, as I mentioned, is a very difficult problem for everybody. So yes, so we are looking at possibilities involving hydrogen and involving propulsion with hydrogen, as well as low carbon fuels involving hydrogen too. But the difficulty with hydrogen is that to produce it at scale, you have to do it in a very environmentally sustainable way. It's relatively straightforward to do it, but it requires energy. And so you need renewable energy to produce hydrogen. So there's a question of, is hydrogen that you're using being derived from fossil fuels, or is it being derived from clean energy? So it's something that we just have to spend a lot of time diving into and figuring out all the details. But it does have a lot of promise.
Interesting. That's a perfect answer to that question. I mean, we've only got but a couple of minutes left. I can't believe how quickly time has flown. But Ryan, start off for us and ask the rest of the panel quickly, just what one leap are you excited for? And as we look into a new dawn in 2021, we, of course, have had significant clouds of COVID, of natural destruction, of climate change impacts that we see here in 2020. Build for us the silver lining of what the opportunity is right now, having received funds from the Climate Pledge Fund. What next exciting moment will we anticipate from you?
Yeah, so I think to touch on what Matt was saying, I really commend the Climate Pledge for driving demand of these technologies. I think if you look at the clean tech things that happened, say, 10, 15 years ago during that previous period, there was this problem of they were basically just more expensive. So if you look at electric motors, for example, there have been high efficiency electric motor designs in the past, but they all required very expensive, exotic, rare earth minerals, all mined from China very destructively, this kind of thing. And so in our case, and in many other the new technologies you're seeing, you're effectively information technology driven. So you're substituting things like material cost, mechanical complexity for information processing, which deflates exponentially. And so this ability to harness information technology to really solve these problems economically for customers, while they're also, as a consequence, saving the environment, I think that's a lot of reason for optimism.
One reason for optimism, Diego, for you?
Yes, also applauding Amazon's effort and many other big corporations in tech and in other industries really stepping up voluntarily to commit to net zero, and then a lot of talent coming to the climate tech world. So despite my loss, I do feel hopeful that we can mitigate climate change, and we have to hurry.
And Rob, one area that you're super excited about?
What I'm really excited about right now is public policy innovation, especially actually just today, Senator Kaminsky introduced the Low Embodied Carbon Concrete Leadership Act, and that is the kind of policy reform that any government, whether municipal or state, can adopt to be able to really drive change. And government is the single largest buyer of concrete. So that can have an enormous accelerating effect on the scale up of low carbon solutions.
And Matt, I guess the excitement for you is the next set of companies you're looking for.
Yeah, no, exactly. As we've alluded to, there's no shortage of really good ideas. And as people have described, I think a lot of the talent and technology experience that has been in Silicon Valley is moving into this area. It's too important not to. I mean, sitting in Seattle for the last week, it looks like a nuclear winter here, and it's something that needs to be addressed. And it's going to be, I think, a lot of momentum in terms of innovation and in entrepreneurs getting into this space. So I'm looking forward to meeting them and hopefully bringing them into this program.
I want to thank all of you so much for bringing your true selves, giving us your stories, your backgrounds, what's driven you and what excites you. And we want to thank Amazon for bringing us this incredible conversation, the money that has been already allocated via the Climate Pledge Fund. Congratulations to those who've already received, and we're excited to see who comes next. But big thank you.